The Vigil for Freedom and Racial Justice is made up of a broad coalition of North Carolinians calling for justice, fairness, and second chances for people incarcerated in our state prisons, especially Black people and other people of color. The campaign is in its third year and is partially focused on a small, regularly rotating group of people and organizations standing vigil at the governor's mansion, since our primary demand is that Governor Cooper exercises his clemency power. As part of the vigil this year, we're hosting a series of community conversations featuring North Carolina-based advocates fighting for freedom and racial justice in our state and educating their community on the ongoing harms of our modern-day carceral system. Today's conversation is about from housing to employment, the barriers people face when returning home. So we're joined today by Tarrah, Callahan, and Vrbsky. Last year, we discussed the needs and barriers faced by people reentering their communities during the pandemic. Arguably, the pandemic has ended, but now the state and the nation is struggling to find employees because of the Great Resignation, yet people with criminal backgrounds remain largely unemployed. There's also a housing shortage that is felt most by people with criminal records. So that's kind of a summary of what our conversation is about today. I do want to reiterate, it is a conversation. So we have presenters, we want to allow them to present. And if you have questions while they're presenting, if you can just kind of jot them down, and then we will devote the second half pretty much to answering questions and continuing the conversation. So I do want to open up by passing it to Tarrah Callahan so she can talk about reentry and employment.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Brent. It's never fun to go after Brent, but I'll do my best. So I am Tarrah Callahan. I run Conservatives for Criminal Justice Reform in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been working closely with folks on this call since we started in coalition to pass the Second Chance Act, and continue to continue to advocate for opportunities to remove barriers to employment for folks with a criminal record. Through the passage of the Second Chance Act, Republican legislators were frequently asking me to speak to various committees about the Second Chance Act as a job bill and really highlight the economic impact of offering these, mitigating these barriers that basically just mean that there's this huge pool of untapped talent that we're not taking advantage of in the state, which is just bad policy generally. Over the years, I've really seen a shift. There's an acknowledgement. We have been working in partnership with the Justice Center and for Justice, and then with Responsible Business Initiative for Justice and the Center for Community Transition to build the North Carolina Workforce Alliance for Justice, which would be a coalition of business leaders who are working both to advocate on behalf of policies that work towards expanding second chances, but then also from their position as business leaders advocating for second chance employment to be meaningful and to offer meaningful advancement, to make sure compensation is adequate, so that they are truly invested in the process of second chance hiring. This is certainly consistent with the Great Resignation. I think in large part, people were leaving jobs feeling really unfulfilled and undervalued by their employers. And so it is entirely consistent for us to both advocate for expanded opportunity, but also that opportunity is meaningful, and that businesses see second chance hires as a real value add to their business and not, as doing a favor to this population. I think this particular climate that we're up against, I've been really thinking through what sort of reforms we might be able to make, given, throwing the rising crime at voters was obviously something that came pretty hard through this midterm. Following the midterm, I attended polling events with the right and the left, kind of the top three items that really drove voters to the polls were abortion, crime, and the economy. I'm not trying to get into abortion, so we'll stick with the economy and crime. I think that the pitch for any of these policies that remove barriers to employment, we can really frame as solutions. They offer a solution for employment. It expands the workforce. 1 in 4 talented North Carolinians are barred for no reason other than criminal record from even being considered, which is just terrible policy. And then obviously from crime, any time that we offer an opportunity for gainful employment, we're breaking cycles of recidivism and helping people stay out of crime. So I really think that anything that we do that expands kind of the coalition and the framing of our issues, so that we're not just talking about these as criminal justice reforms, but rather solutions to 2 key factors that voters care about, which are reducing crime and improving the economy. Everywhere anybody goes, whether it's Starbucks or DHHS, there's a huge shortage of workers, and it's impacting everything across the board. And every time I look at my phone, there's new business moving to North Carolina. And a quick way to ensure that stops happening is if we're not able to provide a workforce to meet those demands. And so I'm really excited to approach this sort of a Get North Carolina Back to Work focus this session and beyond, as putting forward policies that really have a clear impact on expanding opportunity. And I think it makes sense to revisit the driver's license. We were there last year. I think the appetite and the case for why this is good policy is entirely consistent with our Get North Carolina Back to Work sort of pitch. I think North Carolina has the longest waiting periods on felony, on the minimal felony expunction eligibility we have, but even with what we have long waiting periods. So I guess Laura and Whitley and I are going to take that on this session, which should be really easy. But I think anything that we can do just to show the case of the number of people that are looking for employment and are barred only because of the waiting period. That's just, really where the message in the space that we're going to be really working to highlight for the state.
I'm kind of slated next to talk a little bit about employment, but Corey Purdie has joined the call, and Corey is going to be talking some about housing. And so, Corey, can you go ahead and talk about housing and reentry? You got to come off mute, Corey.
Can you hear me now?
I hear
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Can you like 3 minutes get off the little drop zone driving through?
Yeah, it's a little broken up.
Just a little drop zone.
So Corey, do you think you might be in a better location in about 5 to 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's what I was requesting. You can hear me. But give me 5 minutes, I'll be through this little area.
All right, just come back on when you're ready. And
all right.
from here.
All right.
Brent, you're muted.
Yeah, I apologize. Hey, this technology is something else. So let me just talk a little bit about the employment and here in Asheville, right? Asheville is a lot of employment is around hospitality. A lot of people visit here, tons of hotels here, even with Airbnbs booming, they still building hotels here. So the service industry is big. Now, they've always been good partners as far as working with individuals for employment. And it took a while, but over the years, we've got many companies to kind of develop their own matrix. Now, everybody's is a little different, but with some of our, I don't know, just working with folk and our knowledge about it. So what they'll say is, all right, we have these certain convictions, and then we have these certain time frames where we're no longer going to consider that as far as barring someone from employment. And so the more serious the conviction, the longer the time frame. So let's just start with something that we'll say like driving under the influence. So typically if somebody has a driving under the influence, it's not gonna, it don't have to wait a year or 3 years or 5 years since conviction before they consider them for employment. But let's say it's a violent crime. So let's go all the way to like murder, right? So let's say the conviction it's 2022. If the conviction is over 10 years old, then it's not gonna weigh as much as it would if it was 3 years old. And so with all these different convictions, they've developed this matrix. And what it does is give them an opportunity to not just deny someone solely based on the background, but even if I come out and I have let's say a robbery conviction, but it's been over 7 years since my conviction, then I'm still going to get an interview. And if I do well in the interview, I'm going to get an offer for employment. And so that's been good. Now, when COVID hit, and then we started coming out of that, what you seen was the power of supply and demand. Because the more employers were in demand for employees, the more relaxed some of the restrictions became. And I literally was receiving calls saying, look, Brent, I just need people that's gonna show up. So we're not even so much concerned about all of that right now. And that's because of the demand they had for employees. And so back to a little bit of what Tarrah said, because it was crime and economy. And I think there's a correlation. So and we got economy like nationally and just statewide and all that. But if we're improving people's individual economy, then that's also going to steer away from crime. So there's a correlation. A lot of people too, we got to always lift this up when it comes to convictions, right? 90% of people with a conviction will say that somewhere substance use or abuse was related, whether they were under the influence at the time, whether it's property crimes, trying to feed an addiction, whatever the case is. And so when we're working with individuals, we definitely continue to keep that at the forefront and try to make sure people are addressing that. Because it doesn't really matter, and I'll speak for myself, it doesn't really matter what kind of opportunities you afford me. If I'm still in active addiction, it's just a matter of time before I squander the opportunity. And so we're definitely having people to continue to keep that at the forefront. And kind of one of my little quips is I let all our folks know, if you stay clean and stay sober, you're gonna stay free. And I have a little exercise I do too. I'm able sometimes to pull up mug shots through the years. And I did it on myself. And I noticed like every time I was processed in the jail, I was like lit, right? I was never processed sober. And so it was just a moment I had. And so back to the reentry and employment. So employment opportunities are good here right now. And it's just because of the desire and the need for so many folks. And it's not just hospitality, but that is a major employer here. But we've got manufacturing, we've got skilled positions, we've got other service type jobs, we got tons of restaurants, full service restaurants, where people are coming in as a dishwasher and making $18 and $20 an hour, full time. So it's opportunity here. And again, that's relative to the supply and demand. So I'm going to, I'll tell you, we're going to go to Lucas, who's going to talk about special concerns for veterans. And then once Lucas is done, maybe Corey will be in a better position with a better signal. So take it away, Lucas.
Hey, peace and blessings from the Durham Veterans Administration healthcare system. My name is Lucas Vrbsky. I have the privilege of working with veterans incarcerated in state and federal facilities in about 27 counties from Caswell to Carteret. So currently in North Carolina Department of Public Safety, there's about 1,800 veterans. Nationwide, about 8% of folks that are incarcerated in state or federal facilities are veterans. Of those 1,800, about 64 are coming home within the next month. There's about 300 coming home in 2023, and there's about 500 folks who have life sentences. A bunch of them are eligible for MAP. So veterans, there are some special resources that are available, right? There's approximately 10 grant per diem transitional housing programs across the state that are specifically for veterans who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. So we know folks that are coming out of incarceration are at a real high risk for homelessness. One of the difficulties that we've seen both with the VA and the community is about the federal definition of homelessness, right? And so what that says is that if someone has been in a carceral setting for more than 90 days, they're not considered to be homeless. So a lot of times, unfortunately, what we see is folks come out and they've got to literally, sleep on the street or be in an emergency shelter before they can come in and access some of those resources. We've really been trying to change that for our veterans. So we have these 10 grant per diem transitional housing programs across the state. The largest is up there where Brent is in Veterans Restoration Quarter. We have some down in Charlotte, Greensboro, Winston, High Point, Durham, Wilmington, Fayetteville. We also have a few contract emergency residential programs, which are much shorter term. And then we work with a variety of community organizations. One of the best resources that we have for veterans who are coming out of prison is something that's called Supportive Services for Veteran Families. And what that does is if folks meet certain eligibility criteria, so for example, had to have served active duty time, can't have a dishonorable or a bad conduct as a result of a court martial, and are at risk of homelessness, potentially the grantees for supportive services for veteran families can assist with things like utility deposits, security deposits, initial rent to help folks get on their feet. And so we've seen that be a real win for folks coming out of prison. Another thing I want to just briefly discuss is that veterans can access some benefits while incarcerated, right? So for folks who have educational benefits, so generally speaking, that's going to be people who've come out of the service since 2001. There's a 15-year time limit on accessing those educational benefits. They can get correspondence courses and books paid for while incarcerated, right? The other benefit that folks can access is what's called service-connected compensation. And so that's just a fancy way of saying I have an injury or illness that I sustained during my time in the service that continues to impact my life today, right? So why is that important, and what does that have to do with reentry? If we can help folks get guaranteed income that's non-taxable, which is service-connected compensation, we can really help to reduce the risk of recidivism for folks coming out. But what I would say is that if the claims process is somewhat difficult to navigate and cumbersome for folks on the outside of the walls, it's going to be even more so difficult for folks on the inside. That being said, I have seen men and women in brown and green clothes been able to successfully navigate that process. They can't draw the full amount while they're down, but when they get out within a month, it'll be reinstated at that full amount. If they have dependents, or if they're legally married, or if they have minor children, or I think up to 24, 26 enrolled in college, the family can receive what's called an apportionment. If they can show a financial need, they can receive some of that money. And so one of the real pushes that we're trying to do is get veteran service officers to be willing to meet with or work with folks who are incarcerated on that claims process. While you can technically file a claim yourself, it's going to be a lot smoother if you have somebody that's familiar with the claims process to help that. So we have some examples in other states where they've done like a train the trainer model, where they've went in and, you know, maybe went into one facility and trained 20 veterans on, you know, how to assist in the claims process. And then each person who's trained makes an obligation to train like 2 more, right? And so we've seen that be really effective to help folks be able to file those claims. For a short period of time, we had a veteran-specific unit at Maury Correctional that no longer is there. But even if we could do something just to support veterans clubs or veterans organizations in different facilities, you know, furthering the sharing of information and resources, that would be a real win as well. We've definitely seen some difficulties with it's opening back up, but you know, for about a year or 2, it was incredibly difficult to get in and get information of folks. And so there's folks at every VA medical center that are, their positions are dedicated to working with folks who are incarcerated. So Fayetteville, Salisbury, Greensboro, Asheville, all have folks that go into facilities and work with folks who are coming home. So I guess the take home message is that when an individual takes the oath to serve and protect against foreign and domestic, there's a societal contract that they're entered into, right? And so as a society, we have, it's up to us to make sure that that's being fulfilled, right? Just because someone is incarcerated does not take away from the fact that they serve this great nation, right? And again, the take home message is, although there may not be a whole lot that the VA can do while someone is in prison, we definitely want to be there as a resource as folks are getting ready to come home. And so if you need to know, who's in your local area, who you can connect with, please feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate your time, and peace and blessings.
Hey, Lucas, if you could put your contact info in the chat, and that way people can capture that. Hey, Corey, you okay over there?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, I seen the officer talking to you.
No, he come out trying to violate somebody. I let he had to go. When the
Okay.
guys there, I'm like, yeah, he talking about when the guys I guess got a probation violation, parole violation.
I think that's a good segue for you to start talking about housing.
Man, yeah, so much talk. What's up, Kevin? You see Kevin? Kevin here, man. What you think? I know all these people here trying to find out about what needs to be done about transitional housing and people coming out of prison. You know, you veteran, right?
Yes. Yep.
How long you been home?
I've been here almost 2 years.
2 years?
Yep.
You still, Lucas, you up here? This guy, a veteran, man, he's been home for 2 years. He's still staying in transitional housing, man. What can we do about it?
Hey, let's connect, brother. Let's connect and see what's happening.
Oh,
Or you hook me up with you.
Okay. Yeah. So, man, it's just, when we talking about, we here now, and, it's for for a lot of us, we've been doing this for a long time. And want to know across the state, man, what we're going to do, because I've been having these same conversations in 2007, and I'm grateful for, a lot of resources available, you know what I'm saying? But when we getting these calls and these emails from probation parole officers, from the case managers and all this, and then we all got different, organizations that doing different services in different areas, but it's just, I'm thinking about what are we going to do, to prevent this cycle, man. Because even though we get up here and we talk about what's available, and when somebody's being released from Charlotte, or somebody's being released in Asheville, who I call? And talking about real conversations is Mr. Kevin, how you doing, man?
I just got hold of this was my parole officer. It seemed that the original charge was given to me. I wasn't able to have contact with Bill. He heard about it because he hadn't received orders from the court either. And he talked to this judge this morning. He rescinded that.
So what you're saying, the judge saying that now you can talk to Will?
Yeah, we could be, I don't have to avoid it. He doesn't have to avoid me. We can talk, and he knows about it.
Okay.
My parole officer worked quickly.
So Mr. Kevin, he was the judge put in an order that he can have contact with the guy that's actually the facility manager, but the judge made a mistake and put that in the order. But last night they came to violate him and send him back to prison. At 70, how old are you?
He heard about it. He came to talk to me about it, and he said, "When did you?" I don't recall him putting Will. And when he mentioned the void, I was to avoid Dusty, but he didn't say. I don't remember hearing him say Will.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, somebody that was up there heard it, told my parole officer, who then came and said, "Did you know?" I said, "No, I don't. I'm going to try to get to the judge and rescind it." Well, he got to the judge this morning and talked to him, and the judge was kind this morning and rescinded it.
How old are you, Kevin?
I'll be 65 a week from Tuesday.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Tell them happy birthday.
Really
Hey, Corey,
is that,
is that a house
said
you
happy birthday.
operate?
huh?
Is that a house
this
you
is
operate?
No, we just something we built temporarily because I ain't with this, you know what I mean? But we just had to put people in somewhere because they were releasing so homeless. But I'm not with putting people in another institution. So we just had to build this just to get people off the street. I mean,
But I'm saying you kind of operate that house, right?
yeah, we operate it.
Okay.
Mhm. But anyway, I say that to say that but Brent, honestly, man, I ain't into building programs no more and building institutions, man. I mean, it's like what we do. These people coming out of prison, that man been in prison 15 years. They knew he was coming home 15 years. I know we was talking about the same. I know y'all heard it. We all got the same mindset up here. But it's just that now I'm just thinking about really what's next, man. You know what I mean? Because it's just it's not stopping. You know what I mean? Even after the expungements, after the lawsuits, after the voters' right lawsuits, after you know, all these accomplishments that we came together and had over these last you know, last 10, 15 years. You know what I mean? We still got the same issue, man. You know what I mean? And I know you all feel the same thing, but you know, my mind is just thinking different now. So I'm kind of, you know, and then I'm thinking about forget this nonprofit industry, man. I'm thinking about going back to for-profit industry. They're building. Look across the street, man. Across the street, they just built 8, 10 brand new units over here, housing units, man. You know, I mean, all across the state we see building going on. So why are we having a problem with housing people that's coming home from incarceration when people's coming home from incarceration been sitting in there for decades, or you know, and we know they coming back to society, but we having to worry about, you know, I mean, trying to find a shelter to put them in. You know, I'm trying to worry about how to renovate a old school, you know, to try to put somebody in another institution. You know what I mean? So my mind is thinking kind of, you know, not on myself, you know what I'm saying? It gets a group of us talking about, man, in reality, you know, I think we're looking at the wrong channel, waiting for DPS to give us a contract for beds, or waiting for a grant to come through to, you know, when it's on the private sector, it's investors out here that, you know what I mean, that, you know, these people are working. You know, like Brent, you say all the job opportunities you got guys is, you know, working prior to getting out. You got guys on work release that's stacking money, man. You know, that's coming home. You know what I mean? Why they got to come home to another institution, man?
Well,
You know
I'll say
this.
this.
I know this probably ain't, you know what I mean, you know, structured, you know, conversation y'all expected to have from me this morning, but I'm thinking in a different way now. I'm sorry, Brent, go ahead.
No, that's cool. I'm gonna put a button on that. I'm gonna say this, and then we're gonna open it up because we'll see what other people on the call have to say about it as well. But I think one thing we have to do with our men and women coming home, because it's one thing to have the criminal background, but you can also get denied based on credit. you know, and things to that effect. So we got to help people kind of build credit, repair credit, and become credit worthy. So folk will be willing to rent to them as well. But I'm not denying that the background is a barrier. But Corey, thank you for all of that. I do want to open up the conversation right now because we getting down to about 20, 25 minutes left. And I want to make sure, because we got quite a few people on the call, and I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to join in this conversation. So based on what everyone's heard on the call, I want to open it up now for questions. For me, for Lucas, for Tarrah, for Corey. Daniel has put something in the chat. Can you expound on that, Daniel? Because I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
Yeah, sorry to leave you hanging, Brent. You're doing a good job hosting or facilitating. So in result, like you were saying, it's not just sort of criminal records. That's a huge barrier that landlords are looking at. But even beyond that, also looking at credit and even eviction. I mean, it's something Bill Rowe talks about all the time, any sort of eviction action. So even if it was sort of dealt with positively and, you know, the eviction action was dismissed, there's still a record of that being initiated. And that oftentimes can lead to people being, you know, just kept out of good housing. I do have a question and sort of, I guess to sort of build on what Corey was talking about. You know, all of us have been working in, or a lot of us have been working in reentry for at least a decade, and many of y'all longer than that. And it's interesting where, you know, we're very thoughtful and, you know, look for all these ways to make employers feel better, you know, about hiring people with criminal records. And then when you see, you know, the economy shift, you know, and that do more than all of our work combined, you know, and in terms of employing people with criminal records, or and obviously can go different directions, but really trying to think of the private. What have y'all sort of lessons have y'all taken from the private market, and sort of think about the interactions and sort of the innovations of the private market around hiring people with criminal records, and even that sort of dynamic of just the need and sort of how much it has allowed some people to, you know, actually get in to jobs that they would not get into but for the desperate need for employees.
Well, I'll say this, Daniel. I think initially it's just like a company trying to protect their interests. And also, people are looking for folk that's dependable and responsible. And I think sometimes that's what the background kind of says to companies, is that this is an individual who hadn't been the most responsible or dependable. So we're trying to get over that barrier. Now, what I found though, is once they get past that and roll the dice and kind of take a chance on somebody, a lot of times they end up with somebody they say is their best employee, or somebody who exceeded and gone above and beyond that their expectations were initially. And so that's something that we try to sell to employers as well. It's like, you know, most employers are looking for somebody that's going to work for them for a while. We live in an age now where, for instance, my parents pretty much had their same job their whole life. Now people don't only switch 6 jobs in their lifetime. It's a generation now where they're switching careers in their lifetime. And so employers are looking for somebody that's going to come in and be there. And what we sell them is, look, with our folk, you're going to get some of the most loyal people because their opportunities aren't as many as someone else. And that's been a way to kind of mitigate some of the so-called risks that they think they're taking. I hope I answered that. Also, can I ask this? Is it anybody on the call, and I just don't want to be assuming anything, but is there anybody on the call who's been denied housing because of their criminal background? I'll raise my hand first.
Absolutely.
And just as who said that, just how did you kind of navigate? So when you got denied, are you just the kind of person that just said, I'm gonna just keep fighting till I get something? Or did somebody step in and help you? Was it a situation where, you know, you knew somebody, so that worked out for you?
Yeah, and this is Tommy Green. I'm part of I work for the health department, run the FIT program for the Orange County Division of FIT, and also I own a small business called Success While in Transition. And we kind of, you know, teach guys soft skills and things of that such, post-incarceration, how to be successful. And this is actually one of the things we touch on in our curriculum, and one of the things we help guys with FIT. So I got a lot. Long story short, I see this a lot. You know, jobs, housing, that's the biggest barrier this population of people face. I myself, being a formerly incarcerated person myself, just talking about, you know, my own struggles with finding housing and whatnot. So yeah, I'm one of the people, even when I tell my story, it's like, you know, I'm one of the people that were blessed with good family background. You know, I had a lot of support when I came home, so on and so forth. And I thank God for it, because when I did, you know, after my family helped me kind of get on my feet, you know, helped me find a job, get a little bit of money under my belt. And when I did start looking for housing, it was virtually impossible, really. I got turned down everywhere I applied to. Everybody did a background check. My felon record always came up. I actually, to be honest with you, I've been home now since 2015, and I still haven't had no place that I could rent in my name. The first place I actually moved into after living with my dad when I first came home, I actually moved in with my wife at the time. Well, we was dating at the time or whatever, but I ended up moving with her. That was my first place. Then after I got married and I had been out almost 4 years, I think, and I actually had got this job with the health department. So now at this point in my life, I've been removed from my charges. Let's say, let me think. I did almost 12 years. So I had been out like 3 years. So it had been 15 years since I committed any crime, 3 to 4 years removed from prison. I have a government job at the time. I had a pretty stellar resume. Before I worked for the government, I was an operations manager for a company that sold for 20 million. So if by all intents and purposes, I am the quintessential returned citizen that did what they were supposed to do, got their life back together, got a good job, and working out in the community. But even still, with all my credentials, when me and my wife went to try to apply for housing, we was turned down every time that I put my name on the application because of my background again. Only way I ended up in a house now, luckily again, once again, I just had, it's my family background coming back into play and my support system coming back into play. My mom was kind enough to rent her house to me and my wife. So that's how I'm afforded the luxury now of staying in the house, but only because my landlord is my mother. Had it not been for her, I probably would still be struggling trying to find housing. So that's how bad housing is right now.
Hey, thank you
Sorry
for
if I took too
sharing
long, because
that.
I know we're short for time. Sorry if I took too much time.
No, thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate you kind of being transparent. And it got me to thinking about this too. I wonder how many people recidivate because of a forced housing situation, right? I need shelter, I need somewhere to stay. And so the only option for me is an environment that's not best for me. So ultimately, that leads to my recidivating, whether it's just kind of drug infested per se, whether it's a toxic relationship I'm staying in because I need a place to stay, whatever the case is. Hey, thank you for sharing that, Tommy. I do want to, there's some stuff going on in the chat, and I want to ask Terry. There's a company in New York called Grayston Bakery that does open hiring. Can you kind of explain what open hiring is?
Hey, I just found out about them because the company I work for promotes businesses that are doing good work out there. And this company, I just get emails from them and I don't know much about it. I know this guy speaks at conferences, the CEO, but he'll speak to any business that he thinks any business can benefit from open hiring. It's just giving everybody with any kind of barrier to work a chance.
Okay, thank you for that. I just was wondering how far what the open hiring was. Let's see. And we have Irene, who was sharing a resource, honestjobs.com, some conversation around that in the chat. Were there any other questions for any of our presenters?
So Brent, how do you expand a lot of these resources in metropolitan areas, like from Mecklenburg, and Asheville and Buncombe, and Wake? But what about rural Eastern North Carolina? Because like even some of these job apps where I think it's called where they can get a restaurant job and like own the app and go in there for for a few hours to make the $18 an hour. In these rural Eastern, from Raleigh on down to the coast. I mean, I know Lucas, he said he worked in Carteret, but we're not seeing that down here. And those opportunities, like my man here, Calvin, he's how many years you experienced in electrician?
Over 30 years.
30 years electrician,
Yep.
Veteran,
Navy. Yeah.
veteran. But even you tried veteran services and all that stuff in this area. Been out here 3 years, still struggling with job opportunities. So I'm trying to see, like I said, in these metropolitan areas, it's doing exceptional, but in the rural counties.
So Corey, Daniel put his hand up, and so I'm wondering if he's going to address the question you just asked. Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I think Corey brings up a really good issue, and I think one big debate. I first heard about this with MDC Incorporated when they were looking at how to make South Carolina more competitive, and basically it's a huge debate between do you try to build the resources and the jobs and bring them to rural communities, or do you try to create pathways to job centers like that are basically the metropolitan areas that Corey is talking about, and basically try to create pathways to those metropolitan areas. And I think that basically, I think that people have said the second option in terms of getting people to the job centers is the sort of more functional one, but haven't really communicated, that they are sort of leaning toward that approach and effectively are leaving behind people in rural communities. And so I think that that's a real debate that needs to happen even more. But, unfortunately right now, the debate has sort of, in a way, already been decided. And basically it means that rural North Carolina is being left behind.
All right, so we got to move everybody to Asheville.
Relax.
Okay.
Everybody might not like it here, but hey, if you want to give it a shot, we'll try it out for you. But I think too, one of the things, Corey, is just obviously in larger cities and more populated areas, there are going to be more opportunities. I don't know, like even with that gentleman being this electrician, I don't even know how many companies it would be in that area who hires who has electricians who need that. I would just say by the numbers alone, it's definitely going to be more electricians needed in Charlotte than it would be even in Asheville, because how large it is, the more building going on, things to that effect. But I don't think someone should, quote unquote, have to move. And I would say most folk get their job. It ain't even based on what they know, it's who they know. And so networking is always a key. So if I'm him, everywhere I go, that's what I'm talking about. And I'm introducing myself and I'm sharing that I have this skill and I'm looking to be employed in the area. Tarrah has her hand up.
Last thing I'll say about Mr. Kevin. Kevin is he's really close. He's from Charlotte, Statesville, right? Charlotte area. He looking for transitional housing in Charlotte for the last 3 years. If anybody know anything, he's trying to get there. He's an electrician. And if that area has resources, because we try to reach out to reentry counselors, y'all already know that process. But anyway, so if anyone knows anything in Charlotte, you got an electrician here, a veteran that's really located closer to his family.
I think we can work that out. So Corey, we'll be in touch after this. Tarrah, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Hey, I just wanted to hop in response to some of the points that have been made. And Corey, I've been really looking at how we can continue this work, given, obviously the climate we're up against and some reluctance to keep revisiting criminal justice. And I feel like one of the things that I haven't done organizationally is really make the consistent narrative in media across the state about the way that these things are happening. Like, these are conversations that folks who are in the criminal justice world are having, but I don't think that other people have any idea that these are problems. And without us highlighting these things and sharing stories of ways that these policies are impacting individual people, it's really difficult to then showcase at the legislature the need for these reforms. So I'm working with a communication firm to really drive a focused narrative across the state about the ways in which these reforms are just common sense solutions to these problems. But I can't know everything that you all know on the ground doing these things. So if you'll just keep, send me stories that are, and I will put you in contact with our PR people and make sure that these narratives are being driven out in the press, in public education, to legislators, because they don't know all of these things.
Okay, thank you, Tarrah. Roberta has her hand up, and then Corey got a question for you coming. Go ahead, Roberta.
I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that's somebody else's picture there. That's not me. I don't know why my name was on there. I'm not sure who that is.
All right, well, whoever's masquerading as Roberta with their hand up, you want to reveal your true identity? Hey, Corey, why they figuring that out? Mary wants to know what you meant by everybody knows that process in reference to reaching out to reentry counselors.
Really? Well, I'm sorry. But anyway, so we know why reentry counsel was established by Ms. Loretta Lynch and all that stuff and all this process. We don't understand all that stuff. I ain't knocking nobody. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause every resource is good if it ain't doing nothing but giving some water. But with all that being said, is that when the reentry council was established, I was supposed to be able to call Brent Bailey in Asheville, North Carolina, and that's the only call I need to make. I need to be able to call whoever's representing Craven County. That's all. Whoever's representing Mecklenburg, and that, I know it ain't like that. But anyway, with all that being said, and you understand that systems need, I guess, more funding to produce better processes and more staffing. But anyway, so my point in that was saying is that we have individuals down here that's not from Craven County, and of course, Craven County, because we did accept, people with special populations. It's been a dumping ground. But with all that being said, is that Mecklenburg is full of resources. Where you from, Kevin?
Originally,
No, where you from, North Carolina?
Originally outside of Charlotte.
Okay. So we talking about Mecklenburg County right here, and we got individuals in Craven County from Mecklenburg County. Who do I call? That's all I want to ask.
Corey, you call me. This is Christy. I'm on J-Months, but you call me because we got all the resources on the ground in Mecklenburg.
Christy, you're an advocate, right? You're not the reentry counsel. I'm not
the reentry counsel, but if your man needs transitional housing, if your person needs transitional housing right now, I'm happy to hook them up with transitional housing right now. No, I'm not your local reentry counsel. I'm just a member of the local reentry council, but I'm happy to connect anybody with services in Mecklenburg County.
Right. But I'm saying Chris is only one person. And I'm saying I'm not gonna overburden Chrissy. I know we can call, but what I'm saying is that systems, I'm saying that's what I'm talking about, Chrissy. Is that I can't call you, a million people can't call you about everything in Charlotte. You shouldn't be that. Mecklenburg got plenty of resources. Craven County, I shouldn't be, reentry council, they got plenty of resources. I shouldn't be the only person. Brent shouldn't be the only person that we can call in Asheville. That's what I'm talking about, is that, the reality is that we gotta, I'm sorry.
You good. Mary had her hand up. Go ahead, Mary.
I asked that question. This is just an anecdote, but you know, I'm an old lady. When the League of Women Voters here in the Greensboro area said we want to work on criminal justice, we divided into 3 groups. One group looked at what happened pre-trial. One group looked at what happened in prison. One group looked at reentry. And the reentry folks said, well, we've got tons of resources for reentry in Guilford County and Alamance County and Forsyth County. Let's don't focus on that. We ended up focusing on pretrial, but is that just people talking a good game? And it's not really, I mean, obviously that is the case, that you don't have plenty of resources. So that's just an interesting anecdote to me.
I think there are resources, and a lot of times what people think is like if they give somebody information that they've done enough. And I think some of what Corey is expressing is we have to do more than just give people a name and a contact number and an office to visit. Like we got to try to take that next step and make these tangible things. Something some folk don't want to talk about too is like, for instance, Corey has a couple of guys from Mecklenburg and Craven, but they're trying to make their way back to Mecklenburg. If some folks, like they say, well, they have somewhere, they're currently somewhere, so they don't become the priority. The priority becomes the individuals who don't have anywhere to go and who are about to be released. So for instance, like here in Asheville, we what you call resource rich. So I'm able to focus on prison reentry. We have a whole nother team in the office I work in that focuses solely on jail reentry. Because people coming out of jail versus coming out of prison is different populations. You heard Tommy say he was like in prison for 12 years. After 12 years in prison, you're coming out with a certain mentality. But if you've been in jail for 3 weeks, you don't have the same mentality Tommy had after 12 years. And so it's some distinctions and differences there. I think each community is going to handle reentry a little differently because every community is different. And that's why it's on them to take ownership. Also, for instance, in a Mecklenburg County or even in a Buncombe County, you know, we have to stay plugged in with the policymakers, the local politicians, the city council, the county commissioners. And in rural areas, you're going to have to develop those relationships as well. Because when it comes to resources being distributed, you got to figure out how to become a line item on the budget. I hope that answered. Do we have a poll, Tim?
Yeah.
Do we have a poll?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. I just want, yeah.
Go ahead, Tim.
Sure. I know we are reaching the end of our time, and we want to value everyone's time here. I want to thank everyone for the dialogue and the questions we're asking. But I just launched a poll. A lot of people ask during these conversations how they can get involved. I know it can get frustrating when we talk about the kind of uphill battle when it talks about getting these resources for these folks. And so if you could feel free to answer the question on how you'd be willing to support our efforts. If you answer this poll, it helps us tag your information so we can reach out when the time comes to either, sign a petition or contact legislator to help and with those organizing efforts. And so if you can answer that, that would be great. But then I'll throw it right back to you, Brent, to close this out.
Yeah, and I'll say this, I definitely don't have all the answers, but I've been doing this about 13 years. I think I do have a few answers, and I'm willing to work on getting some more. I will say this, and it's become apparent, that when you fight for these type of opportunities, it's a lifelong fight. And sometimes the things we doing today, we just kind of planting seeds to something that's gonna actually harvest later. But if we don't plant the seeds now, then we kind of delay in the process for what we could get later. I give example. Recently, when they expanded the expunction eligibility requirements to even include some felonies, I never, ever thought I would see that day in my lifetime. And so just to have that small victory is something. And it's also, they cracked the door open, so we got to keep our foot in the door and keep on going in and asking for more. Something Darryl talks about a lot of time is sometimes our ask is too small. So we need to keep asking for more. But I'm going to put my contact info in the chat. I want to thank everybody who was a part of this conversation. I really wish we had more time to continue this. And maybe we can get together and continue this conversation at a different time. But I want to thank you for your time today. And again, if you have anything related to reentry and you want to reach out to me, just let me know. I put my contact info in the chat.
I want to say salute to Christy, salute to Brent, salute to Lucas, salute to Daniel, salute to Laura, and everybody that's been fighting. I appreciate y'all, man. But you know what I'm saying? Ain't no all the weight to lay on y'all. They don't stand up.
We appreciate you too, Corey, man.
All right.
Yeah, thank y'all. Have a good day.
Y'all too.